What if I told you that the reason difficult people keep winning in your life isn't because they're stronger, smarter, or more dominant, but because they understand something about you that you don't? And once you see it, once you truly understand it, you will never deal with people the same way again. Because this isn't just about toxic behavior, arguments, or stressful conversations. This is about control, who has it, how it's taken, and why most people give it away without even realizing it. Every time someone disrespects you and you react instantly, you lose control. Every time you try to prove your point to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you lose control. Every time you tolerate behavior that drains you just to keep the peace, you lose control. And the most dangerous part is, you think you're doing the right thing. But what if everything you've been taught about handling difficult people is incomplete? What if the real power isn't in what you say, but in what you refuse to engage with? In the next few minutes, you're going to see a perspective that most people never reach, a way of thinking that shifts you from being emotionally reactive to mentally untouchable. And once you understand it, you won't just deal with difficult people. You'll outgrow their influence completely. So don't watch this casually. Pay attention, because by the end of this video, you're going to recognize patterns you've been missing your entire life. And more importantly, you'll finally know how to break them. Most people believe strength is about what you say in the moment. They think power shows up in sharp comebacks, quick defenses, and having the last word. But if you watch closely, really watch, you'll notice something different. The people who carry real control in difficult situations are not the ones reacting the fastest. They are the ones who can pause, because reaction is instinct. Control is a decision. When someone challenges you, disrespects you, or pushes your limits, your mind immediately searches for a response. Your heart rate shifts, your emotions rise, and there's a pressure inside you that says, say something now. That urgency feels like strength, but it's not. It's impulse. And impulse is easy to manipulate. Difficult people rely on that impulse. They expect it. In fact, they count on it. Because the moment you react without thinking, you hand them control over the situation. Now the conversation is no longer about truth or resolution. It becomes about emotional escalation. And once you're pulled into that, you're no longer leading the interaction, you're being led by it. So the first shift you need to make is simple, but not easy. Slow yourself down. That pause you take before responding. It may only be a few seconds, but it changes everything. It creates space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. And in that space, you regain authority over yourself. Psychologically, this is where discipline lies. It's the ability to observe your own reaction before you act on it. Instead of being consumed by the moment, you step slightly outside of it. You notice the tone, the intention, the energy behind the other person's words. And more importantly, you notice your own internal response without immediately obeying it. This is where most people fail. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack emotional control under pressure. And emotional control is what separates presence from chaos. Think about it. Anyone can stay calm when things are easy. But when someone disrespects you directly, questions your worth, or tries to provoke you in front of others, that's when your discipline is tested. That's when your ability to pause becomes your greatest advantage. Because when you don't react immediately, you disrupt their expectation. You create uncertainty for them. They were prepared for resistance, for argument, for emotion, but instead they're met with stillness. And stillness is powerful because it forces the other person to sit with their own behavior. Now here's where it goes deeper. Pausing is not about suppressing your voice. It's about choosing the right moment and the right way to use it. When you respond from a place of control, your words carry weight. They're not rushed. They're not defensive. They're intentional. And intentional communication is difficult to challenge. But when you react emotionally, your message gets lost. Even if you're right, your delivery weakens your position. People stop listening to what you're saying and start focusing on how you're saying it. And once that happens, you've already lost influence. So the goal is not silence, it's precision. You want to respond in a way that reflects clarity, not chaos. And clarity only comes when you give yourself time to think. Now, understand this clearly. Pausing does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you refuse to engage with it on their terms. You're not ignoring the situation. You're controlling the pace of it. And that changes the dynamic completely. Because the moment you stop reacting impulsively, you become unpredictable in the best way. You're no longer easy to provoke. You're no longer easy to manipulate. And that alone shifts how people approach you. They may not even realize it consciously, but they feel it. They feel that you're not someone who can be pulled into unnecessary conflict. They feel that your responses are measured, not emotional. And over time, that builds a kind of respect that no argument ever could. But this level of control requires practice. It requires awareness. And most importantly, it requires you to let go of the need to immediately prove yourself. Because that need, that urgency to defend, to explain, to win in the moment, is exactly what difficult people use against you. So the next time you feel that pressure rising, don't rush to respond. Let the moment breathe. Let your thoughts settle. And then speak from a place of intention, not reaction. Because the truth is simple. The moment you control your reaction is the moment they lose their control over you. There's a quiet trap that most people fall into when dealing with difficult individuals, and it feels almost noble on the surface. It's the need to explain yourself, to clarify your intentions, to make sure you are fully understood. You believe that if you just articulate your point clearly enough, calmly enough, logically enough, then the tension will dissolve. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone is listening to understand you. Some are listening to position themselves against you. And once you recognize that, your entire approach has to change. Because over-explaining doesn't create clarity with the wrong person. It creates opportunity for them to dissect, distort, and redirect your words. You give them more material, more angles, more ways to keep the conversation alive on their terms. And before you realize it, you're no longer expressing yourself. You're defending yourself in a loop that never ends. This is where emotional exhaustion begins. Psychologically, the need to explain comes from a desire for validation. You want to be seen as reasonable, fair, and correct. You want the other person to acknowledge your perspective. But when you're dealing with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, that validation will never come. Not because your message is unclear, but because their intention is not aligned with truth. It's aligned with control. So the question is no longer, how do I make them understand me? The better question becomes, why am I trying to be understood by someone who has no intention of understanding? That shift alone will save you energy, time, and peace of mind. Because once you accept that not every conversation deserves your full explanation, you begin to communicate differently. You become more selective, more precise. You stop filling silence out of discomfort, and you start using it as a tool. Silence, in these moments, is not avoidance. It's discipline. It's the decision to not engage in a conversation that has no productive outcome. It's the awareness that your words have value, and not everyone has earned access to them. And this is where many people struggle, because silence can feel like losing. It can feel like you're giving up your chance to defend yourself. But in reality, you're doing the opposite. You're refusing to participate in something that diminishes you. There is strength in knowing when to speak, but there is greater strength in knowing when not to. Because when you stop over-explaining, you remove yourself from unnecessary conflict. You stop feeding into someone else's agenda, and you start preserving your mental clarity for conversations that actually matter. Now, this doesn't mean you never communicate. It means you communicate with intention. You say what needs to be said, clearly, directly, and and without excess. And then you allow it to stand on its own, without chasing approval or agreement. Because not every truth needs to be defended repeatedly. Some truths simply need to be stated once and left alone. And when you reach that level of restraint, something shifts internally. You no longer feel the urge to prove yourself in every interaction. You become more grounded, more composed, more certain of your own position, without needing external confirmation. That's where real confidence begins. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself over and over again, pause and ask yourself, is this conversation seeking clarity, or is it feeding confusion? Because the moment you stop explaining yourself to the wrong people is the moment you start respecting yourself in the right way. There comes a point in every interaction with a difficult person where you realize something deeper is being tested. It's not your patience. It's not your communication skills. It's your standards. Because difficult people don't just cross lines. They look for where your lines don't exist. And if you're not clear about your boundaries, they will define them for you. This is where many people struggle because they misunderstand what a boundary actually is. They think it has to be loud, aggressive, or confrontational. They think setting a boundary means creating conflict. So instead, they avoid it. They tolerate a little more, stay quiet a little longer, and convince themselves it's easier to just let things go. But what they don't realize is this: every time you tolerate what disrespects you, you train people on how to treat you. Not intentionally, but consistently. And over time, that tolerance becomes your identity in their eyes. So the shift you need to make is this: stop seeing boundaries as a reaction and start seeing them as a standard. A boundary is not something you create in the heat of the moment. It's something you decide in advance based on what you value and what you're no longer willing to accept. And once that decision is made, your role is not to defend it emotionally. It's to communicate it clearly and hold it consistently. That's where real strength shows up, because setting a boundary is one thing. Holding it is another. Anyone can say, "I don't like being spoken to that way." But what happens when the behavior continues? Do you repeat yourself with more emotion? Do you explain why it bothers you again? Or do you follow through with action? This is where most boundaries fail. Not in the statement, but in the enforcement. And enforcement doesn't require anger. It requires certainty. It sounds like, if this continues, I'm stepping away. And then, if it continues, you step away. No arguments. No dramatic exits. No need to prove a point. Just alignment between your words and your actions. Because the moment your actions don't match your words, your boundary becomes a suggestion. And difficult people don't respect suggestions. They test them. Now here's the deeper psychological layer. When you set boundaries without guilt, you are no longer operating from a place of needing approval. You're operating from self-respect. And self-respect is quiet, but it's firm. It doesn't seek permission. It doesn't apologize for existing. But to reach that level, you have to let go of the fear that setting boundaries will make people uncomfortable. Because it will. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will resist your growth. They may question you, challenge you, even try to make you feel wrong for changing. But that resistance is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something necessary. You are not responsible for managing how others feel about the standards you set for your life. You are responsible for honoring them. And once you begin to do that consistently, something changes. You stop feeling drained by every interaction. You stop second-guessing yourself. You start experiencing a sense of stability that doesn't depend on how others behave, because your peace is no longer negotiable. So when you walk into your next difficult interaction, don't ask yourself how to handle the person. Ask yourself where your line is and whether you're prepared to hold it. Because the moment you stop negotiating your boundaries is the moment people realize they can no longer negotiate you. There is a level beyond control, beyond boundaries, beyond even communication, and most people never reach it. Not because it's complicated, but because it requires something that feels counterintuitive at first. Detachment, not indifference, not avoidance, but emotional independence from the behavior of others. Because as long as someone can disturb your peace, they still have access to your control. Think about that carefully. If their words can shift your mood, if their attitude can ruin your day, if their presence alone creates tension within you, then no matter how composed you appear on the outside, internally, they are still influencing you. And influence, when left unchecked, becomes control. This is why detachment is not about ignoring people. It's about removing their ability to affect you on a deeper level. And that begins with a simple but powerful realization. Not everything deserves your emotional investment. Most difficult people operate in patterns. They repeat the same behaviors, the same arguments, the same tactics. And yet every time people respond as if it's new, they engage, react, defend, and drain themselves, hoping for a different outcome from the same interaction. But once you see the pattern, you stop personalizing it. You begin to understand that their behavior is a reflection of their mindset, not your worth. Their tone is about their internal state, not your value. And when you truly internalize that, something shifts. You stop taking things personally. And when you stop taking things personally, you stop reacting emotionally. That's where detachment begins. Now, this doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become selective. You choose where your energy goes. You decide which conversations deserve your attention and which ones don't. You engage when it's productive, and you disengage when it's not, without guilt, without explanation, without needing closure from the other person. Because closure is something you give yourself when you stop expecting others to change. And that level of clarity is powerful. It allows you to walk away from unnecessary conflict without feeling like you've lost. It allows you to remain calm in situations that used to trigger you. It allows you to maintain your identity, regardless of who you're dealing with. And over time, people notice. They notice that you're no longer reactive. They notice that their usual tactics don't work on you. They notice that you're no longer easily pulled into their emotional space. And whether they respect it openly or not, the dynamic changes. Because you've changed. You're no longer trying to control them. You're no longer trying to fix them. You're no longer even trying to win. You've stepped out of the game entirely. And that's what real power looks like. It's quiet. It's steady. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply exists unaffected. So, as you move forward, remember this: you don't rise above difficult people by overpowering them. You rise above them by outgrowing the need to engage with them on their level. Because the moment you become emotionally unaffected is the moment you become truly untouchable.